The summer before my fourth grade year, my parents, early 30s, bought a home in Doraville, the home that would be my growing up home. 3 children, 3-bedroom house. Do the math, we needed one more room. My grandfather, for my September birthday, finished out part of the unfinished basement and stuck me down in the basement. Wood paneling from early 1970s, and my closet was a 2-foot square in the wood paneling with an accordion door with a magnet, but the back of the closet was underneath the stairs. And here's my secret. When nobody else was paying attention, I went to the unfinished part of the basement, got a saw, and sawed a hole in the lower part of my closet, about the size of my hand, and then I could stash stuff back under the stairs, put the paneling back, old tennis shoes in front, and nobody would know. It worked great. I had all kind of treasures to accumulate. I had my grandfather's dog tags. I don't know where I got a switchblade knife, but I knew I was not supposed to have it. I wouldn't know what to do with it, but I knew I wasn't supposed to have it, so it went back into that space behind the stairs. I think I put some protected Henry Aaron baseball cards so they would not end up in a careless trade and I would lose my treasures. I was hiding treasures so nobody would get to them and so that they would be protected for life. And I was also learning the thrill of accumulation. Accumulation and protecting it is thrilling, and I was hooked early. I had a place to stuff the accumulations, and more stuff, it is just intoxicating. The author Richard Rohr talks about this in his book, Falling Upward. It's a book about the second half of life and people who do it well and people who don't. And he has this great image. He says, we spend the first half of our lives filling up our buckets. More dishes, bigger house, stocks and bonds, 16 different fishing rods. We spend the first half of life filling our buckets. But then he said, the healthy ones among us figure it out. Healthy people figure out that the second half of life is more fun if you empty your buckets instead of filling them. Not everybody learns this. A lot of people resonate with Todd Tiahrt, the former Kansas politician who said, I have more guns than I need, but not as many as I want. That's where most of us probably are, with some accumulation. Some people keep hoarding, keep accumulating, but the healthiest and happiest people are the ones who have learned how to give stuff away. And many of you have experienced this already. Some of you already know that giving your Spode Christmas china to your daughter or your niece was more fun than getting it in the first place. Some of you have already experienced the satisfaction of taking a grandson fishing and giving him 2 of your prized fishing rods instead of collecting 2 more. Healthy people spend the second half of life emptying their buckets, but some people don't. Some people stay so addicted to the thrill of accumulation that they just can't stop, and they never experience the satisfaction of emptying the buckets and giving things away. Some keep accumulating because of competition or the thrill of more stuff, but some keep doing it out of fear. We have people in this room who grew up during the Great Depression of the 1930s. We've all known people who were shaped, whose financial lives were shaped by that era. When unemployment was at 25%, there was a scarcity of food and work, and it led so many of that generation to start accumulating out of fear, because something bad could happen and it would all go away and there won't be enough stuff. And if there's a chance there won't be enough stuff, we should just keep gathering more. Some people are motivated to gather more and more stuff for fear that something bad might happen and it'll all go away. The people of the prophet Joel's era had been through their own Great Depression of sorts. They'd had a plague of locusts. It destroyed the local economy. It had destroyed the crops. It had destroyed livelihood. It was Great Depression BC. And so the people of Israel were naturally afraid after all of this devastation that there wasn't going to be enough. And it was devastating. Listen to how Joel puts this. What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten. Now, needless to say, that's bad times. Things are about as hard as they can get. People are afraid. And Joel is preaching to this post-recession group of people who are scared there might not be enough. Now let me say a word about prophets. The prophets of Israel were first and foremost bold contemporary preachers. Some of us think about a prophet being somebody who foretells the future. But the first role of a prophet is to be a courageous preacher of the day. And Joel, a product of the temple, the author of the book that bears his name, is writing his sermon, his interpretation of the locust plague. He told the people that this horror that's been suffered on them was because they had turned away from trusting God. And now, post-recession, he is urging them to get back to trusting the God of their heritage. He's calling on them to turn back to the worship of God, but first to lament. Put on sackcloth and lament, you priests. Wail, you ministers of the altar. Because he said, a lack of trust in God is what has brought you to this place. It's a fear that there is not enough that has gotten you in this situation. Return to the Lord, he says, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Return your trust to God. Freedom begins when we believe that by the provision of God there will be enough. We do not have to cut holes in the back of our closet and hide things for fear that there's not enough if we trust that God will renew, if we trust that God will provide again. So, in Joel's sermon, here's what he said to the people. Do not fear, O soil, be glad and rejoice. For the Lord has done great things. Do not fear, you animals of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness are green. The tree bears fruit. The fig tree, the vine, they give their full yield. O children of Zion, be glad. Rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given the early rain for your vindication. He's poured down abundant rain, the early and the latter rain as before. The threshing floors shall be full of grain. The vats will overflow with wine and oil. Guess what, he says? The fig tree's going to have figs again this year. It's going to rain in autumn and rain again in the spring. And grain is going to grow. The threshing floor is going to be full of grain. Vats are going to overflow with wine and oil again. By the magic of God's provision, the fig trees are going to have figs again. Can you imagine? The question is whether or not we act like we believe it. This is the starting place for generosity. The fundamental starting place for generosity is whether or not we really believe that fig trees are going to produce figs again. If we do not believe that God's economy is renewing, then we will hoard figs. We will hide our Hank Aaron baseball cards because we will think there will never be another Hank Aaron baseball card ever if this one goes away. Do you see? If there are not enough figs, we've got to hide them all. We've got to accumulate and get more and hide them and protect them. But it's an act of trust to give away what we've accumulated, because it's a way of saying that we believe in the power of God to grow figs more than we believe in the FDIC to ensure our holdings. Today is Pledge Sunday. And following the sermon, the organ's going to play. The children of the church are going to come down these aisles, and we're going to pass all of our pledge cards to the center of the aisle. And everybody in this room is being asked to pledge something to the annual budget of the church. Now, many of you already participate in the biblical model of tithing, that is, giving 10% of your income to the church. May God bless you, and may your tribe increase, and may it increase today even. But some of you have never filled out a card, never given regularly to the church at all. You might want to fill out a card today and say, I'm going to start with 2%. I'm going to start somewhere. Because trusting that God's economy is renewing and that God will make figs again allows us all to give away a portion of what we have so that the ministries of the church can continue. Everybody in the room needs skin in the game. We've all got to take responsibility for loving this place, for caring for it, for doing our part to fund the mission and ministry, salaries, heating and air, curriculum for children, the transformative camps for our youth. Everybody giving some percentage of our earnings to the offering plate. That's the only way all of this happens. We put pledge cards on the pews if you forgot to bring yours. Everybody has to play some role in the ministry of this place moving forward. God has called us into a great new future of ministry, and we have to pay for it. This year we're making a separate pledge to the endowment that not all of you are being asked to contribute to. This is a pledge for those of you who have accumulated assets, those of you who already have 16 fishing rods, those of you who have spent a great part of your life filling your bucket, and now you have the great satisfaction of emptying that bucket for something that endures and never goes away. It's the chance to pledge an amount now or in a state that will go to the TV ministry and the other outreach and media ministries of the church. And it is an opportunity, because giving away your Christmas china is more fun than getting it in the first place. And you get to experience the delight in contributing to an endowment that will bless future generations that come behind us. And mature adults participate in the delight of giving away what they can't keep anyway. It's a chance of creating legacy and giving away figs that you have stored for long enough, in the trust that God will make more figs. So there is a practical side to this appeal. We cannot do the ministry we're being pulled toward if we don't have the ministry to do it. And we are operating this year's ministry out of last year's pledge. As we build the budget for next year, we're trusting this year's harvest of figs, whatever it is. And here's the room today that tells us what the harvest of figs looks like, so we know what we can plan and do and contribute in the name of God next year. But there is also a deeply spiritual side to this appeal. Because we will never be truly free until we trust the generous economy of God. No matter how many figs you accumulate, you will never feel like it's enough until you trust that God brings rain again this year and again next year. The early and the later rain as before. The threshing floors shall be full of grain. The vats will overflow with wine and oil as before. Freedom comes from trusting that it will rain again as before. I love the line as before. It will rain on your crops again. Grain will grow as before. The beginning of generosity is the beginning of trusting as before. Because the God who has always provided for you as before, will make figs again. I learned a prayer several years ago that captures this for me. It captures this important spiritual truth of God's provision. It was written by Grady Nutt. Do some of you remember that name? Humorist of the 1970s, I guess. He was on Hee Haw. Some of you are old enough to remember Hee Haw even, right? He died tragically and early in a plane crash. Baptist in Louisville. We had a lot of mutual friends, though I never met Grady Nutt. Some of our mutual friends are Floyd and Ann Craig, who live in Tennessee. They were close with Grady. Grady was often a guest in their home. He named their horse farm south of Nashville, he named it the No Agenda Retreat Center, which is a great name if you know this couple, because they are beautiful, wonderful hosts. One night, I had stayed in the No Agenda Retreat Center with Floyd and Ann. We all went to breakfast the next morning. We went to a crowded diner in the town there, tables up close to one another. When the food came and the eggs and the hash browns are steaming up and it was time to say grace, Floyd said, "I would like to offer our blessing, and I'd like to offer a prayer that I learned from Grady Nutt. It's a prayer that's become important to me. I think you'll find it important to you." And so we all joined hands. In the middle of this crowded diner, he said, "He did it again." And that was the prayer. It's the prayer of somebody who has learned how to trust the ongoing provision of God. It's the prayer of somebody who is truly free, who recognizes that this meal, like the last one and the next one, is a gift of God. And only the free people get to pray, "He did it again." We are going to test our trust that God will make figs again. Our children are going to come up and down the aisles. You'll pass pledge cards this way. We'll listen to the organ. We'll pray about what our contribution is for next year's ministry. And then we will build a budget for next year that fits the generosity of this congregation. Let's pray and trust together that God will do it again.